Hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
And to the brave hearts listening out there, welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
Get ready for some real-time relationship woo and wisdom
From the front lines with occasional tantrums and tears.
about how breaking rules, blurring boundaries, and tossing tradition can be catalysts for finding your truth.
Let's debunk the fairy tales we were told as children and create a new map for life.
Yes, Disney can go fuck itself.
If you're seeking permission to choose your own path
Freedom is the new F word, people.
and want to feel less alone along the way,
We got you. Please note, this is our side of the story. Our partners and metamors have their own individual experiences, and we do not speak for them. Hi, Janelle.
Hi, Andrea.
I love this different way that you say my name. You know you say my name in this different way
Different way than what?
than everybody else.
People say Andrea to you.
No, it's not about that. It's about your Long Island accent.
Oh.
And actually, the only person that has ever noticed it is Lucian. He actually said it in the very beginning when you're like, this is Andrea. And he repeated it back because he noticed the difference.
Okay, so I say, this is Andrea. And what does someone else say?
It's just a little intonation. It sounds a little bit like Angia when you do it. You shouldn't be self-conscious about it because I'm just very used to it and like that's what you call me.
Like, so basically I'm like slurring the D into a G.
Yeah, a little bit. I don't want you to feel self-conscious about it. It doesn't matter. But it is definitely because I've heard other people from the East Coast do it. And so I'm just like, oh, it's just a little remnant of your accent, which I like.
My gosh.
Anyway,
And I was just in my hometown. That could be it too.
that's right. Well, we're talking about friendship today.
We're talking about friendship, brave hearts, and we've talked in other episodes about like how expanded view of partnership and different things. Just asking.
Okay, so why are we talking about friendship today?
What we're actually talking about is the season of friendship or the seasonality. I now would use the term soul contracts. I think of contracts having a start and an end. And, you know, the challenge admittedly with soul contracts is that you don't know when the ending is going to be. You know, admittedly, it may not even be in this lifetime. But there's this idea that not every friendship is meant to last forever. I mean, we already have this false notion that marriages are supposed to last forever.
Yeah. Exactly, which is what it reminds me of really. It's like there's a big theme here in the parallel with our thoughts on marriage. Like marriage is a very, very, very long commitment. And while I deeply respect the C word, commitment, I don't think it's realistic to promise that you will love someone in the same way for 50 years. And I hope that I change and I hope they change to you too. And friendships really have to be treated in the same way.
Yes, and I think that what's more likely to happen in friendships is that if you change, the friendships fall away. Whereas like if you're in quote unquote relationship, like a romantic relationship, then you're trying to at least move together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Exactly. But I think it's in the same way that it's hard to commit to someone for 50 years in a marriage. It's not like when you start your relationship with a friend, you're like, okay, we're going to be friends till we're 30. You don't really know.
It's true. Although when I was younger, I fell head over heels in love with all of my friends, all these like best friend, girlfriends.
And so there's anything wrong with that really? Like thinking at that time you're going to be friends forever and you're going to be friends for a long time.
BFFs.
I know, right? So that's okay. And then you just have to be okay at accepting when things do change. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I'm so glad to be almost 50, to be able to be sharing from the perspective of the wisdom that I've gained on this topic, because this is definitely not advice I would have had for myself when I was younger. What we're going to share on this.
Okay. So I'm watching a friendship right now that is ending. So it's outside of me, but it is between other people in my life, between 3 different people. And it's heartbreaking to watch. And it's easier, of course, to be objective when I'm not in it. But the bottom line I observed, and why this also spoke to me when you suggested it as an episode topic, was that there's this narrative that we grasp onto when someone pushes us away or creates distance or says they need alone time, or maybe doesn't say anything. They just stop answering texts, answering messages. And you think, oh my gosh, what did I do? Are they mad at me? Why aren't they sharing what's going on? And it is, of course, it hurts. And I've been through that before. It hurts a lot. But the fact is they may not feel comfortable sharing what's going on with you, right? Or they may need to put up boundaries. or they need alone time, or maybe they don't feel the same energy they once did with you, or they're not comfortable with their confrontation. And the fact is, the end of a friendship may have nothing to do with you. I think it's really hard to get to when you're in the middle of it. I was talking about this with my friend last week, and later.
Before you go into that, I just want to reflect on that. Because what I'm hearing is it may not have something to do with you if someone's pushing you away, but it also either may have something to do with you or you may be the one that's pulling back.
Right. Ultimately, all you can do is take care of yourself.
Whether you're the one being pushed or the one that you're doing the pushing.
Correct. And it's just hard to know what's going on in someone's head. And I think it's amazing how we are so much fonder of holding on to the scenarios that we've made up in our heads
To the stories.
rather than sitting in uncertainty. We hate uncertainty so much. And I'm with all of you 100%. I really hate uncertainty. I want to know. I want to know. And ultimately, so we just make up these stories about what might be happening in our friend's head who's rejecting us. So there's a book called The Dance of Intimacy, A Woman's Guide to Courageous Acts of Change in Key Relationships by Harriet Lerner. And she says, I believe that an absence of communication is not an absence of feeling. Instead, it might be an indication that there's so much feeling going on that the person doesn't know what to do with it. And dropping out or tuning out is a safe way to otherwise process and cope with that giant ocean of feeling without having to give a play-by-play to everyone who feels entitled to it. Yeesh.
Yeah, it's potent.
It's really hard, but it is true. Which touches on the whole idea that you and I were talking about, that when someone seems to withdraw or disappear, it's hard to say what that is about. When you're saying goodbye to a friend or putting up a boundary, it might have to do with that friend or it might have to do with your life. But ideally, when you're on the other side, ideally you can take that friendship with that person to maybe a different, healthier level that isn't about the grasping and the holding on and the insisting, but about letting go and allowing and giving grace. And I think that's a really hard step to take, but ultimately that's, stepping back and saying, okay, what this person needs now is distance. What this person needs is space. And I think this just takes me right back to cultural conditioning, which is what we talk about a lot on the podcast, which is we think friendship is supposed to look a very particular way. We like predictability. Some people think that everything should be shared all the time. But the fact is, friendship can look lots of different ways, just like marriage, parenthood, success, and so on. So again, just letting go of form.
Yeah. And I remember being at my mom's funeral and how many women stood up and said Phyllis was their best friend. I didn't realize that about her until then, but it also made me realize that if I was to die at any given moment, I would have had several women say that about me. The piece is that, just like we were talking about poly, is that when we have different friends, like I do have lots of different friends, and they each hold like a different frequency. So all the relationships look different. Like I don't have anyone else who holds the pole of friendship that you and I have in my life, right? And yet I have other friendships that are as important, but just in a totally different way. So I think that there's like a beautiful breadth of variety, of depth, of possibilities when we allow ourselves to be met and to meet another friend in where the overlap is easeful and graceful. There's ease and grace again.
I'm seeing the Venn diagram too, that you love so much. And yeah, actually that makes me think also that, so the older we get, the more work we do on ourselves, the more grounded and complete we feel on our own. And the less we need someone else, even like a friend or a partner, to complete us. And so when I was, less mature, I was like, oh no, I need to be needed by you and I need you to complete me. I need you in my life. I was feeding off other people, which is normal, of course, in any relationship. But I think as I came to know myself better, that I'm just more accepting of like, okay, like we're friends in this way, but we're not friends in this way.
Right. I call you for this, but I don't call you for this. I call someone else for that.
Exactly. And being okay with that, where I think, yeah, when you're less emotionally mature, that's harder to do. You feel hurt because you thought you were their best friend.
But I do think that there is this term of like soul contracts came up, right? Because I have lived a life of very immersive, intense friendships with different women. And I give a lot of me to someone, mostly girlfriends. I wasn't in relationship with my ex-husband until I was 40. So that meant my primary relationships from 0 to 40 were with women.
The term soul contract and best friend, I'd like to dig into that a little bit because soul contract in general feels like contract reminds me of like corporate, real estate, something on paper, and that doesn't feel good to me. So tell me why it feels better to you. And the term best friend is also something I've often rejected. The thing is, like when you're 14, you have a best friend, and I mean, I did too. But for most of my life, I feel like I didn't like, and it wasn't like the Fab Four or like, I remember my mother-in-law asking me that about my wedding. None of my wedding people knew each other. They were all separate, completely separate. I had one-on-ones with all of them, but none of them were my best friend. They were all just different types of friends. I mean, however it looks for you is fine. There's a little release of pressure of like, if you don't have a best friend, that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's good that we're covering this vocabulary. And I think I want to just like call out like this. We were talking about like the end of friendships, but we're really in this moment talking about how are we even defining friendships.
Yeah, which is good.
For me, I had best friends one at a time growing up, but then I had several at a time that were like very deep. I just didn't see them as frequently as like the one pillar. And so like one lived in New York and one lived in LA. So like Anastasia was in New York, Erin was in LA, and Jeannie was the one I saw every day, talked to all the time in Denver, and lived our life together. And we worked together and at times lived together and was at the birth of her child. And I think that the way that I have been with women, I think is probably actually pretty unique. The intensity that I bring to my friendships. I don't know that everyone else has that capacity. I think it's because I was single for such a long time and like it was such an open heart. I also think I had codependency, which I'll talk about. I'm squeezing my hand, but like it's not a constriction. I didn't necessarily feel like a grasping, but it was like a deeply intense friendships. Like I feel like you and I have had a time like deeply intense friendship, and like I have had that always since I was 3.
Yeah, it's really about what I was just talking about last night. It's about loving big. Which do you think you're the same in romantic relationships or no?
So yes, but I think that because until my husband, I didn't have anyone else who
Yeah, took that role.
level in any of my other relationships that were romantic.
Got it. All right, so tell me about soul contracts.
So soul contracts is a term that was offered to me during a psychic session that I had to describe one of my friendships. 2016 was when I had the session, and Jeannie and I had been best friends for 20 years, and I called her my soul mate. We met when I was 19. We had visions of hanging out in our 80s together. We lived together. We worked together. I was in her wedding. I was at the birth of her child. We traveled together, vacationed together.
Yeah, it's huge. I've never had anyone like that. Like, that's crazy and good.
Yeah, like she would stay at my parents' house. I mean, it was very, 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 very intertwined. And even when she got married and had a child, I was an extension of their family. It was the 3 of them and me. And that was just part of my life. And I could not imagine my life without her. And everyone who knew me was like, oh, there's Janelle. Oh, and then how's Jeannie? And it was very expansive. Like I learned so much from her and her from me, I'm assuming. So, but what happened was that there's a transition that happened. And I realized I was no longer happy working at her company where I'd worked for 15 years. And when I decided to leave, I honestly didn't know who I was without that job. My career, best friend, friendships, family, and social life, and the city I lived in were all tied together. Trying to transition out of that friendship, that is during that time that I had the psychic session, and she was like, oh, this is a soul contract. And it wasn't meant to last forever. But she was speaking from like a spiritual or energetic level. And at that time, I was very much in my human personality existence and could not really fathom what she was talking about with ease and grace. So even though when this transition was happening, I had just started dating the man who became my husband, and it took me 5+ years to heal the pain and the confusion of the transitioning of that friendship.
So let me back up. I think after you left working with her, you went on a 6-month travel. And so how did you leave it when you left her?
It was abrupt because I thought I was going to work there forever, right? I had essentially committed. Like, it was essentially I was like in a marriage that wasn't romantic. Right?
Wow, it's fascinating.
So I had already worked with her for 15 years and thought I was there till I retired.
You work at Soul for 15 years. That is a long time to work somewhere. I mean, especially at a place like that. It's not like,
It's not corporate. It's not like, yes, it's not like I had a 401k. It's not like, yes, I didn't have golden handcuffs.
it's so interesting.
Right.
And you were just working 2 blocks away from me for a few years there. Anyway, so, okay, so you left and it was kind of abrupt.
Wasn't that it was abrupt? I actually ended up giving 7 months notice. It wasn't like, here's 2 weeks, but it was still like, there was so many levels of connection. There wasn't a thought that I was ever going to leave. And when I decided to leave, like, I honestly didn't know who I was. And so I decided to do that 6 months of travel to find myself. I refinanced my house, put it up for rent. I journaled and I had a very like limited agenda, but all I knew was like I had to go and like come home to myself. I don't even know if I used those terms back then in 2016, but I was like, I don't even know, should I stay in Denver? Like, who am I? Like, and what I did know was that I was not in any state to go find another job because I couldn't even imagine my life outside of the context that had been in for so long. And what I see now is that that friendship needed to end in order for me to have room for my relationship with my husband. Because essentially I was in a marriage
Right.
that wasn't, from an energetic perspective, there wasn't room for someone else to come in. Like, no surprise that I actually had been single that whole time.
Right. Had you been dating?
Dating, for sure. And I would also say it needed to end so that I could have a relationship with myself. I was benefiting hugely. There was fulfilling parts of this for me, for sure. Like, I'm not taking that away. But I was essentially living her dream life. This was her company. This was her family. This was her town. I had to.
You were holding her up.
I was holding her up and she was holding me up, but I hadn't found what is it that I want. I mean, asking the question, what is it that I want? I had never asked the question and not have her involved.
Just veering off for a moment. What was the catalyst for this? What made you have a change of heart?
Basically came to this recognition. I had thought at different times, maybe I should leave. And then I always came back. And then I realized I was unhappy and I couldn't put a pin or a finger on it. It was basically me, my personality, trying to tell my soul, oh, I know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. You're going to like be working marketing in a lingerie store in Denver for the rest of your life. And my soul being, are you fucking kidding me? You've got 1,000 other things you're supposed to be doing. Why are you still doing this? So in this way, it had nothing to do with Jeannie. It had nothing to do, it had like nothing to do with me. It had to be like, I just was supposed to live a totally different life. It gave me the foundation of all the skills that you know that I'm using today. But I needed to go live them. And I was really staying in a very, 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 very tiny part of myself. And I didn't know that, but I was starting to get unhappy. I became unhappy. And finally I was like, I just have to do something different. I have to say, I'm not staying versus I'm staying.
Wow. I think it's just an amazing transformation that even happened to you. I'm so glad that you became aware suddenly. You're like, wait a second, something's off here. And so let's break it down for Brave Hearts. Like, what did codependency look like? I mean, I know, but I feel like examples are always helpful. Would you say getting that enmeshed with anyone is always a bad thing, or can it be a good thing?
I would say there were so many good things. This relationship was heartfelt, expansive. I learned so much about myself. And I also just want to name, like, we're still friends. I don't see them very often, but they're in my heart in a way. But as I now understand spiritual growth, You need to heal a pattern in order to move on from it. Otherwise, you're going to go into it again. And so the enmeshment and the codependency that I had with Jeannie, I didn't heal it. I just left that friendship because I didn't know I had it. That wasn't a term I was using then. Like I didn't know. I was just like, oh, something, I need to do something different. Let's go find what that is. I then ended up meeting my boyfriend who becomes my husband. And so I brought that codependency into my relationship with him. I allowed myself to enmesh with him in such a way that, and I can say that this is what happened with her without me knowing at the end, was that my light was getting dimmed. And that my light was getting dimmed with him, only he saw it and didn't want it. And I'm not saying she wanted it, but he had the awareness of being like, this isn't mine. I'm not asking you to do this. I'm not asking you to enmesh with me. And so it was with him that I was able to see the pattern and finally break it, which, was obviously very worthwhile and very painful.
How did you remove that codependency? I think that's the hard part.
Well, if you remember, it was you who brought it to my attention.
I know. I'm like, what did I say?
I think you just used the word. I don't actually remember, but I vaguely recall something saying like, I think you seemed codependent. And I was like, what?
Right. Because it feels like a shameful word or something.
Well, not only that, but anyone looking from the outside in would have said I was very independent.
I know what you mean because you're an independent person.
I remember when it was. And I was like, what? But then I asked my friend, another friend, like the next day, Sophie, different Sophie. And she was like, yeah. She's like, I could see that. And I was like, what? And she was like, and I have a therapist who specializes in codependency.
Wow.
And I was like, let me get to the bottom of it. And then and that's when I do what I do, which is when something becomes into my awareness, whether as a shadow or as a desire, I like jump all the way in. I started seeing Deborah like every week. I read books, did rituals, and it was a multi-year journey.
You were the one that helped me discover my codependence also. Anyway, back to friendships.
So as far as Jeannie goes, like, we're still friends and that I still love her. Just because we don't have as much in common now does not negate the impact she had on me during that time. I don't see her or her family very often anymore, but she is by far one of the most impactful relationships of my lifetime. I'm grateful to her and cherish the thousands of moments and fun adventures we had together. So back to what the psychic was saying was that term soul contract helped me see that relationship was foundational to who I have become. I do believe that in one example of the codependency example, that was a pattern I needed to break. And so I get to like see it with her and then had a chance to break it with my husband. There are skills and desires and things. I mean, I bought my house because of her. She helped me. I was from New York. No one bought houses when they were 26 in New York. Like that was just like, at least in Long Island, it was so expensive. And you wait until you're married with kids in your like in your early 30s. And so she was like, no, you're going to live with me and you're going to buy a house. So like there were things that she like my mind really blew open to that have, plus me working in lingerie for 15 years now really is a foundation to like who I am today as a dressing up as a goddess in the goddess temple. So there was so much that I learned from it as well.
Can you walk us through how that was for you guys?
Painful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Really painful. We didn't talk for a very, very long time.
Like we're talking like 3 months or 2 years?
I would say we tried to navigate it talking every couple of months. And that was really, really painful. In a way, looking back on it now, I haven't thought about it in a long time. It was definitely like going through a divorce that was confusing and messy and unclear. And yet we knew that this love was here and this foundation was here. And we like had this vision of like, okay, we're going to like still stay friends. And this is really painful and confusing. So I would say we've seen each other once a year since then.
And so what I'm hearing is that you distanced yourself because you quit and you left on this trip. And so was she like, what did I do? What the fuck? Or not?
I would be putting words in her mouth. I think there was relief on her end as well. Like, I don't think it was super beneficial on her end, right? Me being there as an unhappy employee isn't great. I was an exception in so many ways. I had been there for so long. I was there the longest. Like, it also made her life more complicated. So there's, I'm sure, freedom for both of us in different ways that came through. And we talked about that over time.
Do you feel like you navigated it with her together, or was it a lot of you navigating it separately?
Yeah, navigating it separately for the most part, because for me, I really had to see who I was without her. So I couldn't navigate the breakup with her when I was trying to discover who I was.
Yeah, see that.
And like the breakup, like I said, was for me, was this like energetic soul necessity at a very spiritual level when I wasn't spiritual. So I had none of the words, I had none of the vocabulary, none of the understanding. That was my first psychic session that I'm talking about, where I heard this term soul contract. But since then, I'm able to see how, oh, I have had soul contracts with other friends many times in my life. It was just so sad that I never thought that relationship was gonna end. Whereas my other relationships that ended with these other girlfriends, like my best friend Roxanne, she went to high school when she was 14. That same day, I went to junior high and I was 12. We had been inseparable for 6 years after school, and we never spoke again.
So crazy.
My brother to this day does not understand. And I'm like, oh, now I know that it was a total soul contract and we were just done. Both of us were done. I mean, we lived 5 houses apart. She never tried calling me. I never tried calling her.
I think I just got the soul contract thing. I'm like, it mixes together these kind of disparate ideas, like, because soul is deep and meaningful and contract is time limited, right? And you're mixing them together and you're like, no, it was really deep and it had a limit, which is not something we usually mix together. So I think I like it. I'm kind of adapting to it now, because you don't want to take away from the depth of it, but you also don't want to be in fantasy land thinking that you're going to be together and you're 80, because you might not.
And now I'm so aware that, especially in all these workshops that I've been in and these containers that I'm in that are fixed time periods, that I can go really deep with someone in a short period of time. And then I now know when that container's over, I've moved on. I'm not going to be the person who's like, oh, that was the best week of my life or the best month. I'm like, oh no, because I've got another one happening in a month. So I now am aware that I get to set the expectation for people who feel the depth of my connection to say, I can say, oh, and I'm not likely going to be in touch.
It's like your Burning Man story of like dancing with this person. Do you know what I mean? Where you like had this intense connection on the dance floor and he's like, oh, we're together now. Or we're going to stay together this day or this. And you're like, no, actually.
This is just the moment. This moment is here. But it actually just happened. My dear friend Gabby, she was in this container that I was just in, the 6-month container, Priestess of Eros. And she and I had a conversation. We're very strongly connected. She's like, what happens if you leave me? And I was like, I am going to leave you. This is for right now. And she was like, oh, great. I can relax then. Right. So for her, like, there was an energetic piece for her that was thinking she had to hold on tight. But once she knew that she didn't have to hold on at all because it was just beyond our control.
Whoa, that's pretty profound right there. I'm hearing you say like, stop. It's like, stop grasping.
Yeah. And she just literally went like, just opened her hands and that boop. And her role in my life in this moment, like into the today of now, is so deep and so profound. And who knows how long it's going to last. I expect it actually will continue for a while. She's coming to my birthday and stuff. But I was able to set the expectation. My experience is I'm not the person to count on for the long haul friendship. And that doesn't detract at all from the level and depth of the love and the change and the impact that you have had on me.
Oh, it's like an ocean of profundity and just system adjustment for me. I know you're totally right, and I'm with you. And I think this is at the root of our entire personal development we've had over the last 5 or 10 years. This is about embracing impermanence. I feel like I had a preoccupation with permanence. I remember meeting people randomly, because I was always meeting people randomly because I was super extroverted, and thinking, we're totally going to keep in touch. We're going to have barbecues one day in our yard with our children. I'm always planning for the future and like, this is going to be more. And it's just like such a different mindset. And I see the relief in it, and I see the lack of codependence in it, and I see the beauty of it, but it is almost like I can look back and be like, wow, I've actually just come a long way from that. And it was a hard thing to detach from, this idea of holding on tight and not letting go of anything, whether that's like a house we're living in or a partner I'm with or stage my daughter is at or anything. I think a couple of things happen. One, it helps you focus on the now and the present, be like, let's enjoy what we have right now. And two, it's honoring everyone's particular evolution and growth journey away from you potentially.
Yes. Jeannie obviously also grew. It's not like she didn't grow, but we just grew in very different directions, right? I'll also say that I do have like a very special friend, Anastasia. Hi, Stage.
Hi, Anastasia. I've heard about you so much. I can't wait to meet you sometime.
She's coming to the party.
Oh, yeah.
So, who has been my friend since I was 12
Yeah, amazing.
and met her boyfriend when she was 19, got married at 22, were you Stage? 23. Has 3 boys. The oldest one's in college. Has lived within 1 mile of her hometown her entire life in Brooklyn, New York. She and I have lived very, 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 very different lives. We have managed to see each other through each other's evolution, even when she's looked at me like the past year and been like, oh, okay, I'm with you. I'm with you on the ride. I'm a little nervous. Not my favorite chapter of your life, but I'm here with you. I also want to acknowledge, I think that given the amount of change that I have undergone, that I have someone who's actually been able to stay with me, who is not in this life at all, who does not, like in my life in terms of like doesn't resonate, embody any part of it, and yet is able to see me, accept me, love me, and is like, okay, I'm here for you if you ever need anything. So in that case, like she and I, our soul contract is for this lifetime, it feels like, because we made it this far. And I think soul contracts to me like week-long intensives. Who knows how long yours and mine is, right? But right now, we're both feel so alive. We'll know that it'll end when someone's like, okay,
It's not working for me anymore.
And it doesn't mean like, oh my gosh, it's not like, and none of this was worth it.
Of course. Yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten through the last 5 years without you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just taking it all in. And it's funny because I said to someone just a couple of days ago, I said to my husband, I was like, my goodness. I'm like, Janelle and my life, could they be any more different?
Anastasia would say yes.
I know, because I was just thinking, I'm like, nope, she has me beat in that department. But our day-to-day is so different. And of course, we talk way less than we used to. Like we used to box like multiple times a day. And now sometimes it's just like a couple times a week. We just have really different lives. And we still bond about many things. And so that's okay. And so this is a different season of our friendship than it even was a few years ago.
Just because so much growth has happened even in that time. But what I would also say is, even though the podcast is, believe it or not, Braveheart's a passion project of ours.
It is. We just recorded the 40th episode.
It actually does feel like work for me for some reason. And work in the sense that I'm supposed to be doing this. This is feeding a bigger picture, all of this. And so to me, you are my connection point to this aspect of my career. And we're still totally tied as friends, but you're the only person who holds this part of my career aspect of my friendship, or this part of it. Like, I don't like it's, whether it's the writing, it's the creative, it's all that, right? Like,
yeah, I think it's the intersection also just like,
oh, intersection is the better word.
yeah, of my personal passion with my career. Like all those rivers are flowing to the same ocean now, and yours are as well. And that's where we meet and so it remains. And this podcast is a big tool for our own personal development. Like we talk things out, we express, we figure things out, we share.
Because ironically, I hear you saying that we don't box as much. We don't. However, we are now spending 6 hours a week, twice a month, or we never did. So we're actually probably talking more now than we did before, but just in a structured, organized, and productive way.
And there are also things that like you'll tell me and I'd be like, what? Like you didn't tell me that. You're like, oh, should I not tell you that? It was like a month ago or, whatever, which is fine. There's no problem with that. It's just we miss some of the daily things.
Right. What we're here to do is actually to synthesize the important things. So we're communicating the messages because that feels like the bigger purpose now of our friendships is we don't have to process everything together. We're actually here to try to like explain what our experiences of life are to give everyone else more permission to be their version of themselves.
I think what we're really talking about here is the journey of friendship and the stakes and the mile markers or the way they begin, the way they may end, and how tight of a grip you should have on them.
I'm 50. I've never had a child, but obviously I went through now a lifetime with friends having kids. I have several girlfriends right now who are in their early 30s who will most likely eventually have kids. And I'm really clear that, when they have kids, I'm like, we're not going to be as close. It's just not a shared experience unless I'm a grandmother at that exact same time.
Sure. That could align.
That might align. And I'm aware of that too. But that, that it's just like, we all have our different chapters. And as someone who has women as friends who are 20 years younger than me and 20 years older than me, that there's also different life experiences that we're in at any given moment. All right, Bravehearts. So Andrea and I have just realized we've basically processed our own relationship. What does that mean? What does it look like? How long does it last? And I remember working with Lucian. He was our business coach that gave us the idea to start a podcast. When he said, if you're going to do this, this is like a 3-year commitment at least with each other. We're 1.5 years in to that commitment.
Right. And when we were working together and doing joint services, we had different companies. We had joint services when we were with our 3 to 5 club community. And we were always pitching to clients, and people are always like, you should really have a written contract about being together because you might change your mind or you might have a fallout or you might do something. You're like, yeah, I guess we should do that. But we never did.
We never did. Right. Because apparently we have a soul contract. We just don't know we know it started. We just don't know when it's going to end.
Yeah. And we're okay with dealing with that when it comes. Yeah. So just a little episode on friendship.
Yeah. Friendship, the term soul contract, the way to, recognize that there's different types of friendships and everyone having their own offering.
Yeah. And how to recognize codependency in a friendship and when you might be grasping and not realizing it. Because I think it's easy to just become blind to that.
Yeah. And I do think the reason why a soul contract ends is not because there's anything ultimately wrong. It's because it's making room for the next thing. So I also really want to name that. My whole life as I'm living now, I could not have been in that same friendship and been the person I am now. They didn't go hand in hand to the way that we were living our lives, the way I was living my life.
Right. I see that. It's a little bit like emptying the channel in the same way.
And so I think sometimes I'm like, I can feel the soul contract and it ends gracefully. And then there was the time that I didn't understand it because the relationship meant so much to me and I couldn't imagine my life without it in the same way that it was.
Yeah. And that is really the sign of codependency, being terrified of the other person leaving, whether that's a partner or a friend or your mom or whatever. Thanks for listening, Bravehearts. We love you and we honor your friendships. Be sure and visit permissiontobehuman.live if you want to hire Janelle or me for coaching, and have a great week.
Love you.
Do you need permission to be human? You got it. Listen, subscribe, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about us at permissiontobehuman.live.